What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Engage 8 podcast, hosted by Noah Drury. No co-host or guest today, but don't worry, we got a stacked lineup later in the week on Tuesday when we react to the college football playoff top 25, and then we have Thursday, which will be the predictions and getting into all of that. We could look at the AP top 25 for a little bit, maybe a little bit of a preview of the college football top 25. Notable drop. Clemson dropped all the way to 12 after their loss to Notre Dame. Talk about a little bit about what happened over the weekend, what my reactions were and everything. Washington and Oregon State. Good game on Friday. Didn't get to watch too much of it. Kind of saw a little bit of the catch-up. Michael Penix ended up throwing 52 passes on 298 yards. And they won on a game-winning field goal. Not the big rainstorm that we thought was going to be down there. Speaking of big weather affecting college football, we have Ohio State at noon. This Hall kid, who I didn't know too much of until the game, he started falling out for Northwestern. And, I mean, C.J. Stroud obviously did not play up to his Heisman standards, but it's really hard to play when there's about 50-mile-an-hour gusts and rain falling down everywhere. The receivers didn't help either, couldn't catch the ball too well. I think this was just a testament to see how well Ohio State's defense could play in terrible conditions against a running football team, which, I mean, they did okay. The first half was a little shaky, especially that first drive, but I feel like they were able to keep their palms down and go through the game and end up coming out with a win in a very bad situation. I feel like the running game wasn't the greatest, but they also did not have Trevion Henderson or Jackson Smith-Njigba, who continues to not play for the Buckeyes, keeps dealing with injury problems throughout 9 games. Nothing else too much to say. I really don't think this game's a great testament to what this Ohio State Buckeyes team can be. I think it's just a good game for Northwestern. Maybe show a little bit hope to recruits that maybe want to go to Northwestern in the next couple of years. I don't really want to talk about that game too much. I just thought that it wasn't a great showing for the Buckeyes. We have TCU Texas Tech. This game I'll talk a little bit more about. I watched about the first half of this game and then ended up going to watching it at the end. The punt return early by Davis really set the tone. I feel like TCU had control of this game at the beginning, then lost a little bit of it, but they were able to show that they can grind out on defense and grind out a game as they continue to show that as well. They've played in a ton of close games, and there's no off weeks in this Big 12 conference. I feel like Texas Tech's not a bad team. They have some okay wins and have been able to play close against a bunch of good teams in the Big 12. Big 12 from top to bottom is the best conference in college football, but the teams at the top just don't clearly show. But there's also no off weeks, and teams, when you're not far apart from each other, records and talent-wise, it's really hard to see if anyone's going to come out and be a leader. TCU's been that for the Big 12, but they still have Texas left on their schedule, and still got Baylor, who's not bad either. So it's still not a guaranteed season. Plus, they have to play in the Big 12 championship as well, and have had the luxury of playing a ton of backup quarterbacks as Shao came out when Morton got hurt in this game. But I don't think that made too much of an impact. I feel like Morton wasn't doing too much before that anyways in terms of like domination. I saw that Texas Tech, they had a stat where their 2 outside receivers were 6'5" and 6'4". I think it was this guy, and then I forget the other guy. But Tay Barber and Darius Davis do some damage in the receiving game. A lot of shared receptions, not too much receptions completed as they dominated on the ground with Kendre Miller. Nothing much to say about this defense either. They just kind of grinded the game out and ended up winning 34-24. Not a typical Big 12 score. Moving on. Any other games in the noon slate? North Carolina, Virginia. I guess we could touch on this one. Drake May continues to show that he is a legit Heisman candidate, and that this North Carolina team's not bad. Josh Downs ended up having a career high in receptions this game with 15 for 166 and a touchdown. North Carolina was out with like 3 defensive starters this game. And, I mean, it clearly showed, not that Brennan Armstrong played great, but this Virginia team was able to run the football a little bit, end up scoring. Didn't watch this one all the way through. Kind of watched it towards the end. I like this Drake May kid. I like Josh Downs. I like Antoine Green. I think this team, or is it? It's Antoine. Both the Green guys on this team. I feel like North Carolina's had a lot of good talent over the years, and this might be their most complete team offensively. Maybe if they had a better running back. Elijah Green's not been too bad. It is Antoine Green that I'm talking about. He had a huge game against Pittsburgh last week. Defensively speaking, I mean, 2 TFLs, it's really hard to win when you can't get any pressure or tackles in the backfield. Cedric Gray ended up having a standout game for the Tar Heels. Tar Heels play, I believe, Wake Forest. It is next week. And then rounding out their season with Georgia Tech and NC State. Two good teams on there. Georgia Tech ended up sneaking one out versus Virginia Tech, which Virginia Tech's been having a very piss-poor season. So nothing much to say there. Any other games from the noon slate that I can talk about? That was 3:30. Florida, Texas A&M. Texas A&M is 1 loss away from becoming ineligible for a bowl game this season. Anthony Richardson played all right this game. Nothing. I saw a little bit of glimpse of it. Didn't watch too much. Iowa ended up getting a good win against Purdue. Terrible weather, but Iowa took advantage. Johnson, the running back for Iowa, did damage throughout the whole entire game. Wisconsin, Maryland, kind of the same story. Just Wisconsin had 2 running backs that could keep it on the ground and end up winning this game for the Badgers. Maryland, one-dimensional passing team, relies mainly on their pass coverage, also for defending as well. So I feel like that's just not who Maryland is and could not play in the weather. But we'll see how they do against Ohio State. Other than that, don't have too much to say. We can kind of move on. I feel like I should just go by the top 25s for the rest of the game, or games that I want to talk about. Let's just get to the biggest game. This game right here. Watch this one from basically start to finish. Kind of turned it off with like 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter because we all knew what was going to happen. Hendon Hooker, I feel like he didn't play bad, but his team and him just could not get a single downfield play until the fourth quarter. They didn't have a pass over 20 yards until late in the game. So I feel like this Georgia defense really won this game for the Bulldogs. My bad. It lost the game for the Volunteers. They weren't ever able to get the running game going. Sorry about that. Weren't ever to get the running game going, and then they couldn't just get a downfield pass, which is normally what they succeeded on, playing outside the numbers, and then looking downfield and able to win out games with the running game. I said whoever basically, if it stays under 30, Georgia wins. If it gets over 30, Tennessee wins, and kind of who has the most opportunities. And Tennessee, once the fumble happened, I thought, okay, Tennessee's going to go down and score, do all this damage. They get the field goal, and then Georgia ends up having to punt. I believe they score either the Stetson Bennett touchdown or they go to punt. No, I think they go to punt. It will happen one way. Actually, we could look at the play-by-play. I can't remember off the exact memory. Okay, so Stetson Bennett went in and scored there. They punted, and then they punt right there. And that after that huge punt that was inside the 1, I feel like Georgia just kind of was playing off the momentum of their special teams and defense. And Stetson Bennett was able to make great plays with his arm and moving around in a pocket. He had 10.3 yards per attempt with 2 touchdowns. I felt like this was a Stetson Bennett Heisman moment type of game. You know, he's not like known as like this big time recruit or anything. If you've heard about his story, he was a walk-on this team at one point. Obviously led them to a national championship last year with their incredible defense, and then he showed that he is a top quarterback in the league, whether he goes into the NFL or not. He's going to be a Georgia legend, and he just seems like a great guy out there too. I just feel like he's a good leader as well and has overcame a lot of stuff to lead this Bulldogs team this season. The running game honestly wasn't great for Georgia either. 3.5 yards a carry and 1 touchdown. This was kind of on Stetson. McCockney, he had a big game. I know Arian Smith had a big catch downfield early in the game on a post route. I just loved it. Ringo ended up having a big game. He had that interception and then was amazing in coverage pretty much all games. Tillman had a couple curl routes that he would beat him on, but other than that, he was a big player for them. Christopher Smith was a big player. A bunch of safeties, and get the blitz packages for the Bulldogs were great all game. They were able to get different guys in the backfield. Ended up having 6 sacks on the night, which I told you that this team going into the game wasn't really good at getting pass rush or getting sacks, and they end up getting 6 in a game, which is pretty good. Only 8 total tackles for loss too. Meanwhile, Tennessee got no sacks. Stetson Bennett was able to move around the pocket all day. And I said, but going into this game also, that the pass rush for Tennessee was pretty good. So that just goes to show you that this Georgia defense can really do anything at any given time. Nothing else to say much about this game. I thought that it was a good game for Georgia, and Georgia has asserted its dominance and should be ranked as the number 1 team going into the college football playoff rankings on Tuesday, either followed up by Michigan or Ohio State. Speaking of a team that's probably going to drop way low, I saw that they got ranked 12 on the AP poll. And yeah, no excuses for Clemson here. I'm not going to defend them. No reason to. This Uli Ugly had a terrible game. Cade Klubnik goes out there, throws a pick to Morrison, who I was tweeting about the whole entire game. He had an amazing game. He was locking up in the second and third quarter. No passes really completed his way, and then he ended up getting a pick early in the game and then ended up getting another one later in the game and returning it to the crib to really seal the game for the Irish. Drew Pine didn't even do too much on the game. He basically dumped the ball off to Michael Mayer and let his running game do a lot. Diggs and S-Time had great games for the Irish. They were able to have 5.6 yards per carry on 263 rushing yards. Meanwhile, Will Shipley, he was trying his best early on, but there's only so much you can do when they only have to key in on a running game and a short passing game. If you're Clemson, I mean, you're probably not getting into the college football playoff at this point. You know, getting dominated by the Irish until the fourth quarter. And the Irish, I don't know how good their team is. I feel like they're definitely a lot better. And Marcus Freeman has gotten this team to a different spot than they were in the beginning of the year. But I feel like this just Irish team played a complete football game, and that's something that I feel like Clemson has really struggled with all year, is not putting a complete game together. We saw against Syracuse, they turned the ball over. They weren't able to score well. Syracuse got a lead. Clemson luckily fought from behind because we obviously figured out as Syracuse lost to Pittsburgh 19-9 that Syracuse team really wasn't that good after losing to Notre Dame as well. We find out here that Notre Dame ends up blowing out the Clemson Tigers. And we look at Notre Dame's schedule. I know they played North Carolina and Clemson, beat both of them, and then beat Syracuse as well. 3 supposedly of the top teams in the ACC. And, I mean, Notre Dame's taken care of all of them. So that just goes to show you that the ACC, probably none of the teams should get into the college football playoff. We could talk about this Michigan game for a little bit. Only watched a little bit of the first half. Saw that Michigan struggled early, and then they ended up just making big plays. Donovan Edwards had a big play. Blake Corum was able to get going on the ground more. They had a big pick six from Michael Barrett, able to force turnovers on this Rutgers team. Wimsat, he had one touchdown catch. That was a great moss by Sean Ray. But, I mean, this Michigan team, they've been just proven that they're a second-half football team, and it doesn't really matter what they do in the first half. Able to get a lot of guys in at the end with carries. And, I mean, they're just really playing to play Ohio State at the end of the year, just perfect all the running game, get all the mesh points right, trying to get their offensive line just as prepared as possible, trying to get their defense. Maybe they're just trying to get their defense playing in a close, tight game. I felt like they played good too. Nothing too much other than that. I mean, nothing to say much about Rutgers. They're 1-5 in the conference, not known as a Big Ten powerhouse. Just Michigan going down early in the game, and then them ended up showing up in the second half like normal. Okay, big time game. Probably the one I was most active on Twitter about, and probably had the most emotion for, considering that, who is it? Okay, they don't show him on here, but Nathan Dyer, he does the kickoff for LSU. I texted him after the game on Twitter. I'm like, congrats on the big win, and he just says, thanks. This LSU team, honestly, I thought they were pretty overrated coming into this game. I didn't think highly of the Crimson Tide either, but I thought that this LSU team just wasn't a great football team. Losses to Florida State, and then they ended up losing to Tennessee pretty badly. But Jaden Daniels, man, I watched a lot of I didn't watch a lot of Arizona tape. I just, Arizona State normally plays at 10:30. I would turn it on in the background, and I thought he was a great one-way quarterback running the ball. But he was able to make some passes, not necessarily down the field a lot of the time, but these short, accurate passes to get his receivers going. A lot of good throws to Neighbors, Keyshawn Butte, and then Mason Taylor with the touchdown at the end of the game as well. Able to get his guys on space. There's one corner route that he threw really well. I'm pretty sure it was to Emery or Neighbors. So, Bryce Young didn't have the most accurate game, 6.4 yards per attempt. He was making plays in the pocket most of the game. He ended up having a good drive to tie this game up for LSU, and then ended up doing good in overtime as well. And then Jaden Daniels, he was able to show his escapability, making big plays on the ground. He had made a good one before that too, late in their drive before their last offensive drive before overtime, not when they took the possession to get a 7-point lead. This game was very physical in the first half. LSU kept forcing turnovers, making big third down stops, showing up defensively in the first half. Converse ended up having a really good game, had a pick, was able to make plays on the ball and and pass coverage. Tua had costly penalties early, and he still ended up having a pretty physical game, getting 1 sack and 2 TFLs as well. Bama was able to get to the quarterback. Will Anderson didn't have too much of an impact on this game statistically, but he was getting in the backfield constantly. And, I mean, this was just a really good game to watch from start to finish. Maybe not the most exciting first half, as it was only 7-6, but as you kept watching the game and it winded down, I tweeted out in the fourth quarter before, I think it was very low scoring. It was like 9-14. I'm like, this game's going to be an instant classic. And obviously we saw, and this is Brian Kelly's first big statement win, or a big statement, I guess, game of him coaching, saying that he's arrived and he's going to get recruits here. As always, LSU is pretty good at getting recruits. Harold Perkins, speaking of which, just a freshman, had an insane game too. So it was really nice to see him show out, make plays for the Tigers. In other games, we could talk about Texas, Kansas State. This was a game that we talked about also on Thursday. I ended up I'm pretty sure I took Texas. Texas, Bijan Robinson had a crazy first half, had like 166 yards and like 11 yards per carry and a touchdown. Roshan Johnson got involved too. Quinn Ewers was able to do enough in the passing game. And I felt like this Texas team, they let Kansas State come back into it late. Adrian Martinez, he came back from his first full game since the injury. And he played a good game. 9 yards per attempt, 329 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ended up having a career high in yards for him. Notice a guy that pretty much does everything on his feet. But he got Deuce Vaughn involved in the passing game a lot. They saw that running wasn't working out too well. Malik Knowles had some big catches. Cade Warner was a consistent guy. But this Texas team was too much for him, man. Late in the game, they weren't the greatest defensively, but they ended up making plays. Nothing too much. They had one pick. And, I mean, nothing too much to say. Some fumbles in this game, but Kansas State's receiving was really good, and I felt like the running game for Texas was just too much early on, and they were just trying to control the clock, not do too much, not playing to lose basically at the end of the game, which it almost ended up costing them. But Texas came up clutch. In other games, I really don't have Oklahoma State. Briefly touch on this. Neal had ended up having over 300 yards total for the Kansas offense. Congrats to him. Oklahoma State was playing without Spencer Sanders today, and it showed. But this Oklahoma State team, they're probably going to end up being unranked tomorrow, or not tomorrow, Tuesday. And I mean, that's all I got to pretty much say. I don't think this Oklahoma State team, they've really disappointed me over the last few weeks after having such a good start to the season. Watched a little bit of the Penn State-Indiana game. Penn State's defense was clicking on all levels, forcing Indiana to have negative rushing yards at the end of the first half. Not much of a running team, and their quarterbacks seemed to have high attempt numbers, and they were able to run the football pretty early, had like 4 combined touchdowns at one point between Singleton and Katron, and they were just able to come out winning that game. I saw Drew Aller ended up coming into the game and throwing 2 passing touchdowns too, which is really cool, getting the young guy involved. Syracuse and Pittsburgh. Syracuse, they started Del Rio Wilson. Caden Slovis played. Pittsburgh was out without Abandakanda, so that's a little bit rough, but they still end up getting Hammond Jr. involved and end up still winning this game. So nothing too much to say there. Syracuse kind of fraudulent. Probably shouldn't be in the top 25 as well tomorrow. Nothing too much to say about this NC State-Wake Forest game. Mo Morris, the freshman for NC State, continues to kind of impress people. And I felt like he played a really good game Saturday night as well. Sam Hartman still played decent and got A.T. Perry involved, which seems to be the Wake Forest best pass catcher. So, nothing too much to say there. Kind of two bottom of the pack ACC teams, USC and California. I saw that. I didn't watch this game, but I saw Mario Williams and Jordan Addison were out, and Jack Plummer was able to make plays for California, making this a close game late. And then UCLA was out without Charbonnet and ended up playing kind of a close game. Xavier Valade played on the Wyoming Cowboys, as I just know random players that have played on Wyoming. UCLA, this Pac-12 is going to come down to 3 one-loss teams at the end, and I feel like whoever the winner is, as long as one of the 3 teams with 1 loss and ranked in the top 10 doesn't lose, they'll end up making the college football playoff. We're going to start getting into a little bit of the unranked. Good win for UCF, too. They're going to have a great game against Tulane. I believe they played this week. Yeah, they played this week. I will definitely be tuning into that. 2 of the top 5 group of 5, or 2 of the top 2 group of 5 teams, along with Liberty, in my opinion, as well. Baylor ended up getting a good win against Oklahoma. Saw a little bit of the condensed version of that game. Washington State ended up having a big blowout win versus Stanford. I really liked Cameron Ward from Incarnate Word when he transferred in here for Washington State. Washington State was not Not much of a run team as you look from the statistics. Only 18, or no, never mind. That was the receiving. Normally they are a big passing team, but they ended up getting 300 yards on the ground with 8 yards per carry and 3 touchdowns, and also had 200 yards through the air, 11.6 per reception, and 3 touchdowns as well. Cameron Ward, great kid, shows a lot of promise in his game. He's still kind of young, probably a future NFL draft prospect as well. Great player, does everything right. Two chaos games in the Big Ten right here. Not going to go through them individually. Just wanted to say that when you dominate on the ground and you play in really bad weather, you're probably going to be the team that wins. In Iowa winning it against Purdue, because Purdue's a passing team normally with in O'Connell, and then Wisconsin was able to get Braylon Allen and their other running back involved in that game as well, forcing Talia and their one-dimensional offense to do absolutely nothing. Minnesota was really weird in this game. Went down 10-0 against Nebraska and ended up coming back and winning 20-13. Texas A&M probably not going to be bowl eligible this year. Don't want to talk about it too much. Texas A&M kind of a dead program at this point. Don't really want to talk about them. Good win for Florida. Anthony Richardson looked really good in this game along with Etienne. Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. I guess Georgia Tech's really just trying to kind of rebuild, show people, and maybe try to hire a decent coaching candidate. Iowa State ends up picking up their first Big 12 win of the season. Liberty ended up beating Arkansas late in this game. Kind of let them come back into it, but in the end, they were able to pull out with a win. That's Liberty's first win against an SEC opponent, and Hugh Freeze probably going to take in big time Power 5 job this year, but he's done a great job with this Liberty team. Speaking of which, Malik Willis is playing in this Titans game that I currently have on my screen that you can't see. But, yeah, I mean, other than that, not too much else I want to say about this week. Miami's terrible. Probably should talk about that at maybe in an off-season episode. SMU in Houston. I heard this, that Houston's probably going to allow less points in basketball than they did in this football game. Tanner Mordecai ended up playing a really great game for the Mustangs, and they're 1 win closer to bowl eligibility. They'll punch their ticket. Yeah, nothing too much else to recap. I kind of said what I wanted to say about teams. I was also live. If you look at my Twitter profile, I was also kind of just saying my thoughts then. Not too much else to break down. I felt like I said what I needed to say. Bo Nix ended up having a crazy game with like a rushing, passing, blah, 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 blah. He had like 3 different ways of getting a touchdown, like triple crown or hat trick, whatever you want to say, of touchdowns. Kind of want to say we could review this AP poll that maybe kind of leads to going into the college football playoff. We got Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU, Tennessee. Surprised that Tennessee only drops to 5, but they did play the number 1 team in the country. Georgia almost becomes unanimous in the first place votes. Ohio State gets 1. They are ranked at 2, and then Michigan at 3. I don't really care where you rank Ohio State or Michigan. I think they're both really good teams, and they play each other in the last week of November, and we will see who's the better team then. Oregon at 6, LSU at 7, USC at 8, UCLA at 9, Alabama at 10. Put LSU below USC and UCLA. Honestly, I'm fine with that. I know they just had a huge win and everything. Maybe you could put them above USC. Maybe rank UCLA a little bit higher. I think UCLA is a better team and only lost to an Oregon team, which didn't even lose by much to. And nothing too much to say there. I will be having more to talk about when we react to the college football playoff top 25. Just kind of want to go through, list a little bit of my thoughts. 10 Alabama, 11 Ole Miss, 12 Clemson, 13 Utah, 14 Penn State, and 15 UNC. Alabama, Ole Miss play this week. We'll see who's better. Clemson, You got to drop them a lot after that big loss. Nothing too much you can do there. Utah, good team. Penn State ended up having a really good win. North Carolina, probably, I don't know. I think they're better than the teams below them, but obviously they didn't do too much. Kind of almost had a scary situation there, playing Virginia. 16 Tulane, 17 NC State, 18 Texas, 19 Liberty, 20 Notre Dame. Notre Dame getting in the top 20. Texas ends up being ranked in the AP poll. I know they're ranked in the College Football Playoff poll. NC State goes up after a big win. Mo Morris definitely stepping in that role for Devin Leary missing, which he is a really good quarterback. So I feel like if NC State has him, some games don't look as scary, and maybe they come out with more wins. To round it out, Illinois drops to 21. I don't think they'll get out, but they'll definitely be in the low 20s. Oh yeah, I could have talked about the Michigan State game in Illinois. We'll talk a lot. We'll talk about my Spartans. Yeah, that's how we'll end off the episode. The biased Spartans fan gonna just cheer on his boys. I watched that game closely. Actually, I could give good analysis on it. UCF at 22, Kansas State 23, Washington 24, and Florida State 25. Florida State, after having a huge win over Miami, gets in here, and then Washington, who ended up just picking up a win against Oregon State. Yeah, we could talk about this Michigan State Illinois game. Honestly, I don't think Illinois did too much stuff wrong other than not taking advantage of red zone opportunities. I feel like that's what this game came down to. I don't think Michigan State played particularly well. Defensively, they were doing a really good job of forcing Illinois to pass, forcing the run game not to always be there for the Illini. Tommy DeVito did okay, 25 for 37, 288, 7.8 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. Didn't have a bad game by any means, but he also wasn't able to lead this team with his passing. Isaiah Williams ended up having a huge game for Illinois, getting both touchdowns. He was also a force in the return game, doing a lot for this team. Jaden Reed had one really nice touchdown catch and also had a nice downfield catch as well. And then Trey Mosley had a great catch in the back of the end zone in this game as well. Berger was able to run for a little bit. Broussard got kind of loose on one play to give them a touchdown. Other than that, I feel like this team defensively, even with all the guys out, they were able to make plays. Cal Halliday ended up having a huge game in the backfield for the Spartans. Kind of able to get pressure, wasn't the greatest in coverage, didn't make plays on the ball. But, they offensively, they threw a pick, but nothing too much. They were able to kind of just get a lead in that third quarter and force Illinois to not run the football and throw it, and ended up leading to a big win for the Spartans. Spartans trying to get bowl eligible, and it's definitely possible, still having Indiana and Rutgers on their schedule, 2 teams that aren't the greatest. And yeah, Jaden Reed, and I just felt like Jaden Reed's impact was big this game, and then defensively they stepped up. I really like Isaiah Williams and Chase Brown for the Illini. I've kind of following and rooting for since Michigan State's been bad, but in this game I had to ride with my Spartan Dogs. That's going to bring us to the end of the episode. Really hoped you enjoyed. Kind of went through everything quick since I was soloing this out. Felt like I had to say about what I wanted about teams and games. Definitely going to be talking about a little bit more when we get to Tuesday, which we have a stacked lineup for that. Should be interesting. See where the committee puts teams where after kind of an eventful week, but we'll see. Thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your night or day or whenever you're listening to this episode.